Captain Alex Carter had seen his fair share of missions, but this one felt different. It wasn't the kind of high-stakes, life-or-death operation he was used to. This was supposed to be a simple diplomatic mission, nothing more than a formality. His job was to meet with the leaders of the alien planet, Erifos, and help establish better relations between his people and theirs. The humans had been in contact with the Erifians for years, and the mission was expected to go smoothly. Alex's ship, the Cadenza, descended through the misty atmosphere of Erifos. The planet was known for its vast forests and towering crystal mountains, an environment both beautiful and dangerous. His mission was to meet with the Queen's representatives and discuss the terms of a trade agreement. It seemed like an easy task, just another part of his long career in the military. The moment his boots hit the ground, however, something felt off. The air was thick and the atmosphere was tense. The usual diplomatic agents he was supposed to meet were nowhere to be found. His communicator buzzed with an urgent message, but it was from someone he didn't recognize. The message was short and cryptic. "Find the Queen's daughter. She's in danger. Trust no one." Alex frowned. This wasn't part of the plan. There had been no mention of a daughter in any of the briefings. The Queen of Erifos was a well-known figure, but her family was something of a mystery. Her children were rarely seen, kept hidden away in the royal palace for safety and protection. Why was the Queen's daughter in danger? And why did someone think it was Alex's problem? Ignoring the nagging doubts in his mind, Alex followed the coordinates provided in the message. They led him to a ruined facility on the edge of the planet's wilderness, a place that hadn't been marked on any map he had. As he approached the crumbling structure, he could see signs of damage: broken walls, scorch marks, and overgrown vines curling around the metal framework. It looked abandoned, but something didn't sit right with him. His instincts as a soldier told him to be cautious. He carefully made his way inside, his boots echoing in the empty corridors. The air smelled stale, the kind of place no one had lived in for years. Yet, as he moved deeper, he heard a soft sound, a faint cry. It wasn't the sound of a wild animal or the wind. It was the sound of a person. A woman's voice. Alex hesitated for a moment, then continued forward. Turning a corner, he saw her. A young girl, no older than 16, hiding in the shadows. Her wide, fearful eyes locked onto him. She was dressed in torn clothes, her face bruised and scratched, but she still looked regal. The soft glow of the distant moonlight illuminated her features, and for a moment, Alex forgot his mission. This was no ordinary girl. She was an Erifian, a royal. He could tell by the delicate patterns on her skin that marked her as a member of the royal family. And from the shock in her eyes, Alex realized exactly who she was. She was the Queen's daughter. Before he could speak, the girl took a step back, fear evident in her every movement. "You're human," she whispered. You're here to kill me, aren't you?" Alex's heart raced. He was caught off guard. The girl had no reason to trust him, but her words left him shaken. He wasn't here for any kind of harm, yet the terror in her eyes told a different story. This wasn't just a diplomatic mission anymore. It was personal. "I'm not here to hurt you," Alex said, his voice calm. "I'm here to help. You're the Queen's daughter, aren't you?" She nodded slowly, her face pale. "Please, don't let them find me. I can't go back." The weight of her words sank in. There was more to this mission than he ever imagined. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that everything he thought he knew about this world was about to change. Captain Alex Carter's mind raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. The young Erifian princess, terrified and alone, was standing in front of him. He could see the fear in her eyes, but he also saw something else, a quiet strength hidden beneath the layers of panic. The princess, whose name Alex now knew was Lyra, had been hiding in the ruins for days. Her escape from the royal palace had been no accident. She wasn't just another runaway. She was running for her life. Alex wasn't sure who had put her in danger, But he knew one thing for certain. Whoever they were, they would stop at nothing to find her. "Why are they after you?" Alex asked, his voice gentle. Who would want to hurt the Queen's daughter? Lyra hesitated, casting a nervous glance over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. "I don't know all the details," she said quietly. "But I know there are people in the royal court who want to use me to take the throne. They believe that my mother is too weak to rule, and they think I can be used as a puppet. When I refuse to cooperate, they try to kill me." The words hit Alex like a punch to the gut. A princess being used as a pawn in a political game wasn't a new concept, but hearing it firsthand was different. The princess, someone who had likely been sheltered and protected her whole life, was now fighting for her very survival. "Do you have a plan?" Alex asked. "Do you have somewhere to go?" Lyra shook her head. "I was supposed to meet some trusted allies, but I don't know who I can trust anymore. Everyone I thought I could rely on might be working for the enemies of my mother." Alex rubbed his chin thoughtfully. He had been trained for missions of all kinds, but this was different. This wasn't just about survival. It wasn't just about completing a mission for the military. It was about protecting someone who needed help, someone who was more than just a target. He had never expected a mission to take such a personal turn. "If you trust me," Alex said, stepping closer, "I'll protect you. We'll figure out where to go from here." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty, but also a glimmer of hope. "You're human," she whispered, as if trying to make sense of the situation. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Alex shrugged. "Sometimes you do what's right, even when you don't have all the answers." Her gaze softened. "I don't know what to do next. I don't even know who to trust anymore. But I do trust you." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. This was becoming something he hadn't expected. He hadn't signed up for a rescue mission, and he certainly hadn't signed up to protect a royal. But here he was. The stakes had changed, and Alex couldn't ignore the feeling that he was caught in something far bigger than he'd ever imagined. "I'll keep you safe, Lyra," he promised, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "We'll figure this out together." Lyra nodded, but Alex could tell she wasn't convinced. The fear was still there, just beneath the surface. He knew he couldn't promise that things would be easy, but he could promise that he wouldn't let her face this alone. As they moved toward the exit of the ruins, Alex's mind raced. He needed to figure out their next move, but more than that, he needed to understand what was happening in the royal court. Who was behind this conspiracy, and why had they targeted Lyra in the first place? For now, though, his only priority was getting her out of there alive. The rest could wait. As Alex and Lyra left the ruins behind, the thick forest surrounding them seemed almost peaceful, but the tension between them remained palpable. Lyra moved quietly by his side, her steps light but cautious. Alex couldn't help but notice how much younger she seemed now, without the walls of the palace or the protection of her royal guards. She was just a girl who had been thrown into a world of danger and betrayal, with no one she could truly trust. Despite the seriousness of the situation, there was something about Lyra that intrigued Alex. She wasn't just a princess to him anymore. She was someone who had been forced to grow up far too quickly, thrown into a game of politics she never asked to play. "So, what happens now?" Alex asked, breaking the silence. "Where are we going?" Lyra hesitated, her eyes scanning the dense trees around them. "I don't know. I have no idea who I can trust anymore. The palace was never a safe place for me. Everyone always wanted something: my name, my power, my position. I didn't realize how bad things had gotten until they came after me." Alex nodded. He knew all too well what it felt like to have others make decisions for you, to be a pawn in someone else's game. His military career had been full of moments where he had no choice but to follow orders, no matter how wrong they felt. But Lyra didn't have the luxury of simple orders. Her entire life was a series of choices others made for her. It was no wonder she was afraid. "Do you have any family left?" Alex asked, his voice quiet. Lyra shook her head, her face hardening. "My mother, she's the queen, but she's not the same. The court's been after her for years. I'm just a tool to them. They think if they control me, they can control her. That's why I had to run." Alex frowned, trying to understand. He had never been part of a royal family, but he knew the weight of responsibility, and it sounded like Lyra carried an unbearable burden. She wasn't just running for her own life. She was running for her mother, the throne, and the future of her people. For a moment, Alex's mind drifted. He had lived a life of orders and duty. He knew what it meant to protect others. But something about Lyra's story made him feel like he wasn't just protecting a princess anymore. He was helping someone who had been forced into a role she never wanted. It wasn't just duty anymore. There was a strange pull inside him, something deeper than obligation. "Listen," Alex said after a long pause. "You're not alone in this. I'm here, and I'll help you figure it out." Lyra looked at him, her expression softening. "I don't know what to say. You barely know me. You have no reason to help." Alex smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. Sometimes it's not about reasons. It's just what feels right. They continued walking in silence, the only sound the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. But the quiet was different now. There was an unspoken understanding between them. They were no longer just two people thrown together by circumstance. They had begun to share something deeper: trust. Lyra had been running from the people who wanted to use her, but now she was placing her trust in Alex, a human soldier she had only just met. For the first time since he had landed on Eryphos, Alex felt a sense of purpose that went beyond the mission. It wasn't just about completing an assignment. It was about protecting a life, a future, and perhaps the hope that things could be different for Lyra. "Where do we go from here?" Lyra asked, breaking the silence again. Alex looked ahead, scanning the horizon. "We find somewhere safe. Then we figure out who's behind all this and how to stop them." Lyra nodded, her expression more determined now. "And if we can't stop them?" Alex met her gaze. "Then we make sure you get back to your mother, and we fight to make things right." The dense forest surrounding them seemed endless, stretching on in every direction like a green maze. Alex kept a sharp eye on their surroundings as they moved, knowing full well that the danger they had just escaped was still very much alive. The bounty hunters sent by the factions who wanted to control Eryphos were relentless, and the moment they realized Lyra had disappeared, they would stop at nothing to find her. They stopped for a moment to catch their breath. Lyra was exhausted, her face pale, but she refused to rest for long. She kept glancing over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to appear at any moment. "We need to keep moving," Alex said, looking around. He scanned the area with his military training, searching for any signs of pursuit. The last thing they needed was to be cornered in the middle of the forest with no escape. "Stay close to me." Lyra nodded, though her nerves were clearly getting the best of her. "How do we know who we can trust?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Everyone in the palace, everyone I thought was loyal. They've betrayed me. I can't keep running forever." Alex understood the fear in her voice. She was a young girl who had never known anything but the walls of the royal palace, and now she was thrown into a world where trust was scarce and survival was uncertain. He couldn't blame her for feeling like there was no one left to trust. "You're not alone in this," Alex said firmly, trying to reassure her. "I'm not going anywhere. We just have to keep our heads down and stay ahead of anyone who's looking for us." They continued to move through the forest, the silence between them growing heavier. Every rustling leaf, every snap of a branch made Lyra jump, and Alex knew she was on edge. It wasn't just the fear of being hunted, it was the fear of being alone. Alex's mind was busy calculating their next move. The bounty hunters would be tracking them, and if they had any hope of surviving, they needed to get to a safe location where they could regroup and plan. But where? The nearest settlement was a few days away, and that was if they didn't encounter trouble along the way. Suddenly, Alex heard a faint sound, something moving in the bushes. His hand instinctively went to his sidearm, but he quickly held up his hand to signal for Lyra to stay silent. "Stay behind me," he whispered. Lyra froze, her breath shallow. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. Alex stepped carefully, his boots making little sound as he approached the noise. A low growl echoed through the trees. Alex's instincts told him it wasn't human, it was something else. His eyes scanned the trees, but it was hard to see anything in the thick underbrush. Without warning, a large four-legged creature leaped from the shadows, its teeth bared, eyes glowing with a fierce hunger. Alex had no time to react before it lunged at him. Instinctively, Alex raised his weapon and fired. The shot echoed through the trees, and the creature howled in pain as it fell back. But it wasn't dead. It was wounded and in rage. "Get back!" Alex shouted, pulling Lyra away from the danger. He fired another shot, this time hitting the creature in a vital spot. It let out a final roar before it collapsed to the ground, twitching. Lyra was shaking, her eyes wide with disbelief. What was that thing? "It's a local predator," Alex said, keeping his gun trained on the creature. "We need to stay alert. There are more dangers out here than just people." Lyra nodded, but she was still visibly shaken. Alex knew this wasn't just about the danger in the forest. It was about survival in a world that had turned upside down for her. They couldn't afford to be careless. They couldn't afford to stop moving. The threat of the bounty hunters was still looming, and Alex had no idea how long they could keep running before it all caught up to them. But one thing was clear, no matter what came their way, whether it was bounty hunters, wild creatures, or the harsh terrain, they had to stick together. Alex made a silent promise to himself that he would do whatever it took to keep Lyra safe. "We'll make it through this," Alex said, his voice firm. "But we have to keep moving." Lyra looked at him, her fear slowly giving way to a sense of determination. For the first time since they had met, she nodded without hesitation. The days seemed to blur together as Alex and Lyra continued their journey through the wilderness. The thick forests of Erifos provided some cover, but it also made it harder to find their way. They had to stay alert at all times, never knowing when danger would strike again. The memory of the creature still lingered in Lyra's mind, but her fear of the predators was nothing compared to the dread she felt at the thought of being caught by the bounty hunters. Despite the growing threat, there was a new kind of peace between them. They had settled into a routine of survival, each relying on the other in different ways. Lyra had learned to trust Alex's instincts, watching him carefully as he navigated the forest. She had never been outside the palace, and now she was learning how to survive in a world that was dangerous and unpredictable. Alex, on the other hand, had come to admire Lyra's strength. She had no experience in survival or combat, but she adapted quickly. She was resourceful, and she wasn't afraid to learn. It was clear that the princess wasn't the fragile, pampered royal he had imagined. She was strong in ways that Alex hadn't expected, emotionally and mentally, even though her world had been torn apart. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the forest was bathed in the soft glow of twilight, Alex and Lyra sat by a small fire they had managed to start. The crackling of the flames was the only sound that broke the silence. Lyra's eyes were fixed on the fire, but Alex could see the worry in them. "Do you ever wonder what it's all for?" she asked softly, her voice almost lost in the night. "I mean, I don't even know where we're going. It feels like we're running in circles." Alex paused, staring into the fire. He had thought about that question countless times. It was hard to imagine a future when everything seemed so uncertain, but he couldn't let her see the doubt in his own heart. "We're not running in circles," Alex said, his voice steady. "We're heading somewhere safe. We'll find help, and we'll figure out who's behind all of this. But first, we need to stay one step ahead of them." Lyra turned her gaze to him, searching his eyes as if looking for some sort of reassurance. She needed something to hold on to, something to believe in. "You really think we can stop them?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Alex nodded. "I do. We'll figure it out. You're not alone in this, Lyra. I've got your back. I'll protect you." Lyra looked down at her hands, her fingers fidgeting nervously. "You don't have to protect me," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I'm not some helpless princess who needs saving." Alex softened at her words. He understood the pride in her voice, the desire to prove herself. He had seen it in countless soldiers over the years, their need to fight for themselves, to take control of their own fate. But this was different. Lyra had been thrust into a world she hadn't chosen, and she didn't deserve to carry the weight of it alone. "I know you don't need saving," Alex said, his tone gentle. "But sometimes we all need someone to watch our back. You've had to carry the weight of your mother's throne, your people's hopes. I'm just here to make sure you don't have to do it alone. That's what trust is, right? Having someone who's got your back, no matter what." Lyra met his gaze, and for the first time, Alex saw something shift in her eyes. It wasn't just gratitude or relief. It was something deeper. Trust. "I trust you, Alex," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think I could trust anyone again. But I trust you." Those words, simple, yet powerful, hung in the air between them. In that moment, something shifted. They weren't just two people caught in a dangerous situation anymore. They were partners, sharing the burden of their journey. Alex felt a deep sense of responsibility for Lyra, but now it was more than just protection. It was about mutual trust. For the first time since the mission had started, Alex allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make it through this, together. Lyra smiled faintly, her eyes still wary but softened by the sincerity in Alex's voice. "Thank you." They both sat in silence for a moment, the fire flickering between them. The world outside was still dangerous, still full of threats. But in that small moment, they had found something worth fighting for, a bond that neither could have anticipated, but one that was stronger than anything they had faced so far. The night was quiet, but the tension in the air was palpable. The forest around them had become more ominous as the days passed. Every crack of a branch, every movement in the shadows seemed to remind Alex and Lyra that they were being hunted. But now, it wasn't just the bounty hunters they had to worry about. It was the forces behind the plot to tear Lyra's world apart. They had been on the run for weeks, moving from place to place, never staying too long in one location. Lyra had grown stronger, but her fear of the political conspiracy lurking in the shadows had not faded. Alex had done his best to reassure her, but even he couldn't deny that they were running out of options. The mission to protect Lyra had started out as something simple: rescue the princess, keep her safe. But now it felt like something much bigger. The web of politics and betrayal that surrounded her was more tangled than Alex had first imagined. The factions that wanted to control the throne were everywhere, and Alex knew that someone in the royal court had betrayed Lyra. Lyra sat by the fire, her eyes distant as she stared into the flames. The weight of everything pressing down on her shoulders was visible in her tired posture. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, breaking the silence. "I don't think it's just about me. It never was." Alex looked at her, curiosity in his eyes. "What do you mean?" Lyra's gaze didn't leave the fire. "My mother, the queen, she's been trying to keep peace, but peace comes at a cost. Some of the factions aren't just after power. They want to rewrite the entire structure of our society. They think that if they control me, they can change everything." Alex frowned, feeling the weight of her words. "So it's not just about your life. It's about the future of your people." Lyra nodded slowly. "Exactly. And I'm starting to think that even if I make it back to the palace, things might be beyond repair. The power struggle is too deep. It's like they've already won." Alex's mind raced. The stakes were higher than he had imagined. It wasn't just a matter of protecting a princess anymore. It was about preventing a civil war, or worse, a complete collapse of the system that had held the Erythians together for generations. The politics on this planet were as dangerous as the wild creatures they had encountered. "We can't just let them win," Alex said firmly. "You're the Queen's daughter. You've got a right to the throne. We need to expose the people behind this plot and stop them before they tear everything apart." Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of uncertainty and hope. "How do we even begin to fight something like this? I've been running for so long, and I don't know who I can trust anymore." Alex leaned forward, his expression serious. "We start by finding the people who are loyal to you, people who still believe in the Erythian throne. We need to get the truth out, expose the conspiracy for what it is. It won't be easy, but it's the only way to stop them." Lyra's eyes narrowed, her resolve hardening. "If we do this, there's no turning back. It's not just my life on the line anymore. It's everything. My people, the throne, everything." Alex nodded. "I know. But if we don't do something, all of it could be lost." There was a long silence between them, the weight of their next move hanging in the air. Lyra knew what Alex was saying was true, but the fear of what might come next was overwhelming. They were about to step into a political nightmare, a war of deceit and power that would test everything they believed in. But as Alex looked at Lyra, he could see the spark of determination in her eyes. She wasn't going to run anymore. She wasn't going to let them win. "I'm with you," she said, her voice steady. "Let's expose them." The fire crackled as the two of them sat there, the decision made. There was no turning back now. They would face the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. And they would fight, together, to stop the forces that sought to tear Lyra's world apart. The journey had taken its toll on both Alex and Lyra, but their resolve was growing stronger with every passing day. The weight of their mission was heavy on their shoulders, and yet they had no choice but to press forward. The conspiracy against Lyra and her mother was becoming clearer, and every step they took seemed to lead them deeper into a political maze that threatened to swallow them whole. Alex had never been one to fear authority, but he knew that going against the royal factions would put both his life and Lyra's in danger. The political game on Erythos was one of power, betrayal, and secrecy. But what really drove him forward was the realization that Lyra wasn't just fighting for the throne. She was fighting for the future of her people. The stakes had never been higher. One evening, as they made camp in a hidden valley, Lyra spoke up. Her voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it now that Alex hadn't heard before. "My mother will be furious when she finds out I'm still alive," she said, her eyes fixed on the fire. "She's been fighting for so long, trying to keep the throne and protect the kingdom. She won't want me to return if she thinks I'm a threat to her reign." Alex didn't respond immediately. He knew how complicated the situation had become. If Lyra returned to the palace, her life would be in danger. But at the same time, if she didn't return, the power struggle would only worsen. There was no easy solution. "I don't think your mother will see you as a threat," Alex said finally, his voice steady. "She'll see you as her daughter, the heir to the throne. You're her blood, Lyra. And no matter what anyone says, blood runs deep." Lyra shook her head. "I don't know if she'll still see me that way. There are too many factions trying to take control. They'll stop at nothing to make sure I never take the throne. They see me as weak." Alex moved closer, kneeling beside her. "You're not weak. You've survived more than anyone could expect. You've made it this far, and you can make it the rest of the way." Lyra didn't respond right away. Instead, she looked up at the stars, the only thing in the sky that felt constant and untouchable. "I hope you're right," she whispered, more to herself than to Alex. "But the truth is, I don't even know if I want to go back. The palace, it's not the home I remember. It's a battlefield now." Just as the words left her lips, the sound of rustling leaves broke the moment of quiet. Alex's hand instinctively went to his sidearm, his eyes scanning the shadows. They weren't alone. Before he could react, a group of armed Erythian soldiers emerged from the darkness. They were cloaked in the official uniforms of the Royal Guard, but their faces were cold and their intentions clear. Alex stood, positioning himself between Lyra and the approaching soldiers. "Stay back," he warned, his voice firm. "Who are you?" The leader of the group stepped forward. His armor gleamed in the dim light of the fire. "We are loyal to the Queen," he said, his voice carrying authority. "We have orders to bring the princess back to the palace." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The soldiers were sent by her mother, but their appearance here, so close to the camp, felt more like a threat than a rescue mission. "You've been looking for me, haven't you?" Lyra asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and defiance. "Do you know what's going on at the palace? It's not a safe place for me." The soldier leader's eyes narrowed. "We know what's happening, Princess, and we know you can't hide forever. The Queen commands your return, whether you want it or not." Alex stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "We don't answer to the Queen. Not yet. And you don't have the authority to take her." The tension was thick. The soldiers were clearly loyal to the Queen, but their mission wasn't clear. Were they here to help Lyra or bring her back to the very dangers she was running from? "Your mother is a symbol of power, Lyra," Alex said quietly, his gaze never leaving the soldiers. "But she doesn't control your fate. You do." Lyra looked between Alex and the soldiers. The pull of her mother's authority, the weight of her family's expectations, and the danger that lay ahead were all crashing down on her at once. "I can't go back like this," she said softly, her voice full of uncertainty. "I'm not sure I'm ready to face her fury, or anyone else." The leader of the soldiers stepped closer, his expression hardening. "The Queen's fury is nothing compared to what will happen if you do not return. She has been searching for you." Lyra stood up, facing the soldiers with a new determination. "I'm not going back to be used as a pawn in a political game. I'll go back on my terms, not on hers." Alex's heart swelled with pride. Lyra wasn't just a scared princess anymore. She was a leader in her own right, ready to fight for her future. "I'll be with you," Alex said firmly, stepping beside her. The next few days were tense. Lyra's resolve to face her mother's throne and claim her place was growing stronger, but the closer they got to the capital, the more Alex could sense her unease. She wasn't just running from the political factions that wanted to use her. She was also running from her own fear of what her return would mean for her relationship with the Queen, her mother. They had been moving through the forest for several days now, keeping to hidden paths and avoiding any possible threats. Despite the looming danger, there was a certain calm between them. The silence wasn't filled with tension anymore. It was more like a quiet understanding, a bond forged by the shared dangers they had faced together. One evening, as they made camp near a river, Alex found himself pacing the edges of their small campfire, his mind restless. The weight of the decision they had to make, whether to face the Queen and return to the capital, loomed over him. He had trained for battles, for missions, for strategy. But this was different. There were too many unknowns, too many forces pulling in different directions. Lyra sat by the fire, her back against a tree, her eyes closed. She seemed lost in thought, her expression distant. Alex could tell she wasn't sleeping, even though the day had taken a lot out of them. She was a princess with too many burdens, and now she carried the weight of her people's future on her shoulders. "Lyra," Alex said softly, breaking the silence. She looked up at him, her eyes wary but grateful for the distraction. "What is it? Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice low. "Going back to the palace, I mean. There's no telling what we'll face once we get there. We're not just walking into the Queen's court. We're walking into a battlefield." Lyra hesitated, her gaze shifting toward the fire. "I don't know what to think anymore, but I can't hide forever. I have to do this. I have to face the people who've been pulling the strings behind everything." Alex nodded, understanding the burden she felt. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the same conflict he had seen in many soldiers. They couldn't run from their fate. They had to face it head on. "I'll stand by you," Alex said firmly. no matter what happens. Lyra smiled faintly. I'm glad you're with me. Just then, the sound of footsteps broke through the quiet night. Alex's instincts kicked in. He stood immediately, his hand going to his weapon, ready for whatever danger might be coming their way. But when a figure emerged from the shadows, it wasn't a soldier or an enemy. It was someone they had trusted. Varric. Alex's voice was filled with surprise and suspicion. What are you doing here? Varric, one of the few Erithian allies they had made on their journey, stepped forward with a weary look on his face. His once confident stance was now shaky, and there was a glint of fear in his eyes. I'm here to help, Varric said quickly, his voice low and urgent. But we need to move now. Alex's gaze shifted to Lyra. There was something in Varric's voice that set off alarms. The urgency in his tone was real, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. What's going on? Lyra asked, standing up. Varric's face tightened. There's no time to explain. The capital is surrounded. There's a full-scale search going on for you. If we don't leave now, we'll be caught. Alex's grip on his weapon tightened, but he kept his voice steady. Why are you telling us this now? Why not sooner? Varric's eyes darted around, his body language tense. I didn't have a choice. I had to make sure you were ready before I could act. I've been trying to buy time for you, but now it's too late. They're coming for you. Before Alex could respond, he saw it. The flicker of guilt in Varric's eyes. You're not helping us, are you? Alex said, his voice cold and accusing. Varric's expression faltered, and for a split second, Alex saw the truth. The betrayal was real. Varric wasn't a friend. He was part of the plot. You're working with them, Lyra whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. You were never on our side. Varric's face twisted into a grimace. I'm sorry, Lyra. It wasn't supposed to go this way. But they have my family. I had no choice. Lyra's hand went to her chest, the shock of betrayal cutting deep. You promised you'd help me. I had to make a choice, Varric said, his voice breaking. And I made it. I'm sorry. The soldiers who had been tracking them emerged from the shadows, their weapons drawn, surrounding them. The betrayal was complete. Alex's heart sank. They had walked straight into a trap. Get them, Varric ordered, his voice shaky, but his command was clear. In that moment, Alex knew there was no way out through peaceful means. The fight had just begun, and the path forward was darker and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The trap had been set. Varric's betrayal cut deep, but there was no time to dwell on it. The soldiers surrounding them, weapons drawn, were a clear threat. The forest that had once felt like a safe haven now felt like a cage, the dark trees closing in on them. Alex's mind raced as he looked at Lyra, her face pale with shock. The trust they had placed in Varric had been shattered, and now they were caught in the open, outnumbered and outgunned. You know the rules, one of the soldiers said, his voice cold. You're coming with us. The Queen demands it. Alex stepped in front of Lyra, his stance protective. He had been trained for situations like this, but this wasn't just about survival. It was about keeping Lyra safe. She wasn't just a princess anymore. She was a symbol, and she wasn't going down without a fight. We're not going anywhere, Alex said, his voice firm. If you want her, you'll have to go through me. The soldiers didn't hesitate. They raised their weapons, and Alex's heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't sure how this would play out, but he couldn't back down now. Lyra's life, and the future of her people, was in his hands. Stand down, a voice commanded from behind the soldiers. The soldiers froze, and Alex's eyes narrowed. The voice was familiar. A figure stepped forward from the shadows. Captain Nira, the leader of the Royal Guard. She was a woman Alex had worked with before, one of the few who had seemed genuinely loyal to the Queen. But now, seeing her standing there, her expression unreadable, he wasn't sure where her loyalties lay. "Captain," Alex said, his voice low. "What's going on?" "You're with them." Nera's gaze flickered briefly to Lyra, then back to Alex. "I'm with the Queen," she said, her voice steady but cold. "I have orders to bring the princess back. You're standing in her way, and that's not a good position to be in." Alex's hand hovered near his weapon, but he kept his eyes locked on Nera. "What's really happening here?" "The Queen doesn't want this. She's been fighting against these factions for years. Why now? Why turn against her own daughter?" Nera's expression softened for a moment, but she quickly masked it. "You don't understand, Captain. The Queen is losing control. The factions have power now, more power than we can fight. The only way to save Eryphos is for the princess to return and claim the throne. If she doesn't, the planet will fall into chaos." Lyra stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "You think I can just walk into the palace and fix everything? The factions will use me as a pawn. I've been running for my life because I don't want to be part of their game." Nera's face hardened. "If you want to save your people, you have no choice. The Queen believes this is the only way to restore order." Alex's mind was racing. He knew there was more to this story than Nera was letting on. The Queen was a symbol of strength, but her position was crumbling. It seemed like everyone around her was playing a dangerous game, trying to control the future of Eryphos. Lyra wasn't just a princess. She was the last hope for the people who still believed in the throne. But could she truly trust the system she was being asked to return to? Alex took a step closer to Lyra, standing by her side. "I'm not going to let you be used like that," he said, his voice resolute. "We'll fight for your future, not theirs." Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty and fear, but also something stronger, hope. "I can't do this alone, Alex, but if you're with me, maybe there's still a chance." Alex nodded. "I'm with you. We'll fight. But we need to make our own way. The palace isn't the answer. We need to expose the truth." For a moment, Nera stood still, her gaze flickering between Alex and Lyra. Then, without another word, she signaled for the soldiers to lower their weapons. "I won't stop you," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "But the road ahead won't be easy. You'll have enemies at every turn." Lyra's face set with determination. "I'm ready for that." With that, Nera and her soldiers turned and disappeared back into the forest, leaving Alex and Lyra standing in the quiet, the weight of their decision pressing down on them. The Queen's throne was within reach, but it wasn't the throne Lyra had thought it was. The real battle was about to begin, not for power, but for the future of her people. And Lyra knew, deep down, that her path would be one of uncertainty, betrayal, and truth. But whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. Together with Alex, she would fight for what was right. The night was colder now, and the silence between Alex and Lyra felt heavier than ever. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch on endlessly. They had come so far, faced so many dangers, and yet the real challenge was only just beginning. The decision to expose the truth and fight for a future that wasn't controlled by those seeking power was the hardest one Lyra had ever made. She stood in front of the small campfire, her eyes focused on the flickering flames, as if they could offer some sort of answer to the questions swirling in her mind. Alex, sitting nearby, watched her quietly, sensing the weight of the burden she carried. The princess who had once been hidden away in the safety of her palace was now standing on the edge of a revolution, ready to take back what was rightfully hers. But it wasn't just about the throne anymore. It was about her people, her world, and the choices she was about to make. "Alex," Lyra said suddenly, her voice soft yet filled with determination. "Do you think it's possible that I can actually change things? I've spent my life hidden from all of this, running from it. Now it feels like I'm being thrown into the storm." Alex stood and walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've already changed things, Lyra, just by standing up, by refusing to be a pawn in someone else's game. The hardest part is over. Now it's about fighting for what's right. Lyra turned to look at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of uncertainty and hope. I've been afraid for so long. Afraid of what I might face if I go back, if I confront my mother and the factions who have used me. But I can't keep running. If I don't do this, everything I've ever known could be lost. Alex nodded. You're not running anymore. You're leading. And there are people who will follow you, who will fight with you. You're not alone in this. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words sink in. There was a moment of stillness between them, a moment where everything seemed to slow down. She wasn't just the daughter of a queen anymore. She was a leader, standing on the edge of something bigger than herself. Let's do it, she said, her voice firm. We expose the truth. We fight back against the factions, against the people who have been pulling the strings behind the scenes. It won't be easy, but we have to try. Alex smiled, a look of pride in his eyes. That's the spirit. The days that followed were filled with intense planning, strategy, and a quiet determination. They knew the risks were high, but they also knew that the alternative was even worse. If they didn't act now, Lyra's future, and the future of Eryphos, would be decided by those who only cared about power. They sent word to the few allies they had left, people they could trust, and gathered support from those who believed in the true future of the kingdom. The plan was simple but dangerous. Expose the conspiracy, take control of the palace, and confront the factions that had torn Eryphos apart from the inside. But nothing was simple in a world filled with lies, betrayal, and secrets. Alex and Lyra stood together, facing the palace from a distance. The structure loomed in the horizon, a reminder of the legacy Lyra was born into, and the battles she now had to fight. This is it, Lyra said quietly, looking at Alex. No matter what happens, I know this is the right thing. Alex's expression was serious, but filled with unwavering support. We'll face it together, Lyra. No matter what comes next, we fight for the truth. And with that, they began their final march toward the capital, knowing the road ahead would be full of challenges, but also knowing that they had made the right choice. The future of Eryphos was uncertain, but one thing was clear. This was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Lyra, but for the kingdom itself. The fight wasn't over, but they were no longer just survivors. They were warriors, ready to change the fate of their world.